I'd like to call to order the June 17, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. And I'd like to read the following. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting are being recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anybody on the line this evening who intends to record all or any part of this meeting? Great, seeing none. I see very familiar faces on the call, but I'll just say that we have one item on the agenda tonight, and that is to review and vote the asset purchase agreement between the town of Hingham and Aquarion Water Company of Massachusetts. That's the only item on the agenda. We will discuss it at the board level first. Joe, Mary, and I may have questions or comments, and then I will welcome questions or comments from the public after we've had a chance to chat about it. So if I could just maybe offer a couple of remarks. You know, this has been quite a year, as you all know, and then going on consistently in the background has been the steady progress toward closing the acquisition of the water company. And as I think you've heard me say in prior meetings, those efforts began the day after town meeting last year and really have continued unabated. You know, I would say almost daily, certainly weekly, and more recently, I would say daily, by a whole host of people. Typical for Hingham is, you know, it takes a village, and we join in and we pull the same oar. And so I would just like to extend my thanks for getting us to the point tonight where we're able to consider an executed asset purchase agreement. The agreement's been executed by the parent company of Aquarion of Massachusetts, I believe, by Eversource, and the Board of Selectmen would vote to execute, you know, and complete the countersigned contract tonight. But I'd like to first thank our legal team. We really could not have completed this transaction in the time we completed it, with the level of certainty that we have about the transaction, without the advice of John Coughlin, Kerry Ryan, Susan Murphy, Kevin Feely, and Rick Manley. You know, I can't stress enough how hard that team worked on all aspects of this deal, and really gave us, I think, the confidence to understand what was in the asset purchase agreement, what should be in the asset purchase agreement, and just superb negotiating with a partner that, you know, at times had to be brought along, let's just say. You know, this started with the significant volunteer efforts of prior boards of selectmen and advisory committees, and the staying power through it all. Seven plus years was the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee. Little did John Asher, Joe Bierwith, Josh Krumholtz, Bob Higgins, and Ed Siegfried know when they signed up just how long and how detailed their work would be, but just how very critical, again, to our ability to move forward with confidence, to recommend to town meeting to purchase the water company. And you know, pure speculation on my part, I don't think that Eversource and Aquarion understood the level of competence brought to the table by our volunteer committee to understand the numbers in many cases better than they did at certain of our meetings. The Transition and Evaluation Committee will continue on, but has again played a critical role in developing rules and regulations and an understanding about how the town will move forward with its O&M operator, Suez. And that's chaired Jim Taylor, Scott Sear, Joe Welch, David Von Liska, and Dick Norman. You know, again, fabulous, committed work, serious work that provides the foundation for the town to take over the operation of the water company. Our consultants, Bob Gollage and Andy Gottlieb, Jeff Nutting, and Environmental Partners Group, Ryan Trahan and Mark White. You know, this is a very sophisticated utility, a highly regulated space that we needed to make sure we understood all of the ins and outs of the operation of the water company so we could translate that into an RFP for the O&M vendor. We needed to understand the town's regulatory compliance issues, and we needed to package all of that so both the O&M vendor and the town could demonstrate to the Department of Environmental Protection and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that we can do this. And as Mary, I think, mentioned a meeting or two ago, we got that endorsement of our business plan from the Department of Environmental Protection more quickly than we thought and without any question. And again, you know, without the level of expertise around the table, I'm not sure it would have come together as quickly or as professionally as it did. Our financial team, G. Montgomery and Sue Nickerson, you know, Mary will speak in a little bit about the financing and the borrowing and the purchase price. Again, we need confidence in those numbers to be able to go out to the financial markets and ask them to buy our debt. And without Jean and Sue and Mary, frankly, working the Excel spreadsheets that are a legacy probably from John Asher, we wouldn't be here this evening. And finally, just a stellar team in the Board of Selectmen's office: Heidi Gall, Sharon Perfetti, Sally Sinclair, who we all still miss, Michelle Monsegur, and Tom Mayo. This has been an all-out effort. And you know, and then last but certainly not least, my colleague Mary Power, who has been working diligently on this, going on her 6th year. So it's a big night tonight. It's in a lot of ways, I'm really, really disappointed that we can't be together in person to, I think, celebrate and acknowledge the contributions of the team, and really just getting to the point of being able to sign up the acquisition and to move forward with the town's operation of the water system. And as you all know, it gives us now the opportunity to really evaluate and improve that system, both for the good of the ratepayer and the good of our very stressed watershed. So maybe what I'll do at this point is turn it over to John Coughlin for a few remarks, and then perhaps Mary. But John, I think it would help, since, as I think I've said more than once, this was a transaction really without example. Our purchase right was in an ancient statute, and we had to take that statutory right and translate it into an asset purchase agreement, which is before us tonight. So if you, and I think that, you know, I think one of the things for the Board of Selectmen was making sure that we were getting what we paid for. You know, we asked town meeting for an appropriation, and we needed to make sure that we were getting what we paid for. But we also, there were some things we didn't want, and we needed to make sure that that baggage didn't come along with this purchase of the assets. So John, I don't know whether you might make a few remarks about the structure of the agreement and maybe some of the high points for the public record.
Sure, absolutely. So as everybody knows, the town had the statutory right under the 1879 statute to purchase the water company. So at last year's annual town meeting, the town obviously voted by more than the 2/3 vote to exercise that right to purchase, and they also authorized the Board of Selectmen to take all actions necessary to complete the purchase. So this asset purchase agreement is the roadmap that has the terms, the conditions, and the time frame to complete that purchase. During the interim, Aquarion has been and will continue to operate the water system under the Good Husbandry Standard up until the closing date. So what this asset purchase agreement does is it takes the statutory right and spells it out in a document that both sides agree to as to how we're going to structure this closing, the time frame for structuring it, and most importantly, fixing the purchase price so that there's no dispute about that when we get to the closing table. So just a quick overview, you start with the assets. The town is purchasing all of the rights, privileges, and franchises owned by Aquarion under the 1879 statute. So we get everything that comes with the system unless somehow it's specifically excluded under the agreement. So that includes the water treatment plant, the water pipes, the system, the wells, the distribution system, the real estate, you know, the permits, the contracts, the SCADA system, all of it comes to the town, the vehicles as part of the purchase. There are some items that the sellers will retain. Obviously, there are items. This is not a stock sale. This is an asset sale. So the company has certain assets like pension funds and those kind of things that they retain because the liability for that stays with the company. So those assets would stay with them. So under Section 1.3, the company also retains certain liabilities, which are the broad categories of important liabilities. Basically, while they operated the system, any damage they caused to customers or third parties remain theirs. Any environmental damage caused to third parties remain theirs. All of the obligations to the employees, the pension funds, all remain theirs. All the tax liability remains theirs. Any obligations to regulatory agencies during their operation remain theirs. So there's a list of retained liabilities that I think is very important that the company keeps those and that those do not pass to the town as part of the purchase. And then under Section 2.1, which is probably the most important piece, the purchase price is established and fixed so that there's no dispute. The price is based on the court formula purchase price. As everyone recalls, the town went through years of litigation to get a court judgment determining the price. So that is established in there. Also, some of the good husbandry expenditures for capital get added in there, and the town gets some credit for stuff like the water balance fund and some other matters. So there's an accounting right down to the penny, exactly what the town will pay for the system, and that is laid out in Schedule 2.1 in detail so that we know exactly what we're paying and what we're getting. The agreement establishes the closing date as the end of July, July 31st of this year. The sellers, Aquarion, we're anxious to have a closing date at the end of the month because it's easier to close the books and do a final meter read and a final accounts receivable at the end of the month. So that's the date that's been selected in this agreement. And, general terms, the parties agree to deliver all documents necessary to complete the closing, take all actions necessary to complete the closing. So we'll get a bill of sale, we get the deeds, we get a transfer of all the contracts, everything we need to take over and operate the system. So that's the essence of the agreement that puts into effect the town's decision to purchase the system under the warrant article in last year's town meeting.
Thank you, John. So Mary, I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit, first of all, about the agreement and then maybe a little bit about the purchase price formulation, or do you want to have Joe ask some questions? I think it might be helpful if you set the stage a little bit as well, if you don't mind.
I think John has described the asset purchase agreement. Basically, the purchase price was based on the statute, plus the town was responsible for any of the capital during the good husbandry period, which began the day after town meeting. In the last year, the town has invested about $3 million into the system. So that amount will get added to the purchase price, and we are well within the authorization from town meeting.
Great, thank you. Joe, any questions or comments with respect to the asset purchase agreement?
First, comments just to really echo what you said, the incredible work that was done by a host of folks, including yourself, Karen, as well as Mary on the board and the others. It's just been incredible. And I think John has gone over the major terms. We've had a number of discussions offline going over the specific issues in the asset purchase agreement. I just want to hit some high points, make sure that we all have a good understanding. John, you've gone over the retained liabilities, the items that are being retained, the liabilities being retained by the seller. Could you just briefly describe the assumed liabilities? What liabilities will the town be assuming?
Sure. So there's a definition of the assumed liabilities in the agreement, and the assumed liabilities are limited to any of the assigned contracts that we take as part of the assets that come with the system. And there's one easy example to explain that. Part of the system includes a lease of a cell tower that's at the water treatment plant. So the town gets that lease as part of the purchase. It's an asset that comes with the sale. We'll get the rent from that lease for the remainder of the term, but we step in as the landlord now of that lease. So we have to take over whatever the obligations and the liabilities of the landlord under that. So that would be an example of an assigned contract. We also take over the water balance program because we're getting a credit for those funds. Any obligations under the water balance program would be the town's. Once we take over the system, anything to do with the liabilities and obligations arising from the ownership and operation of the water system after the closing would be the town's. So once we purchase the system, it's now our system. And if a pipe breaks a week later and has to be fixed, then the town has to fix it. Once we own it, it's our system. We don't go back in time. And then the final category of assumed liabilities is any liability under the statute, the 1879 statute. There's a section 13 under that statute. If there are any liabilities under there, which we do not believe there are any, those would be assumed by the town. Because we exercise our statutory right, we have to take whatever comes with that statute. So those are the categories of assumed liabilities.
Thank you. What are the contingencies to closing? What needs to happen so that after we sign the P&S, we actually close the deal?
Sure. So there are steps that have to happen in order to close the deal. We have to have an O&M vendor under contract, which we're in the process of doing with Suez. We have to have the funds available to complete the purchase. We have to have the approval of DEP, which has already happened under the business plan, and there'll be some subsequent filings with DEP to move it over. There has to be a billing arrangement in effect between the O&M vendor and Aquarion to continue the billing during the transition period. So all of those items have to happen in order for the transaction to close on July 31st.
Good. Once we sign the P&S, how will this affect consumers in terms of who they pay, the operation? Is this going to be disruptive? What will the consumer see?
Sure. So for the next 6 weeks until July 31st, there won't be any change. So Aquarion will continue to operate under Good Husbandry. They'll continue to do the billing. They'll continue to do the operations. Following the closing date on July 31st, after that date, Suez, or assuming that contract gets approved, Suez will be the operator of the system. So at that point, there'll be a different company running the system. In the interim, the plan is for Suez to do the operations, to continue to use Eversource to do the billing during interim billing period, and then eventually Suez will take over the complete billing operation. So the consumers will continue to get their bills, they'll continue to get their service, but it will be done through Suez and not through Aquarion after July 31st.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a number of issues that I had before, and that really, thanks to Mary's efforts, those issues have been addressed, they've been resolved, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but the contribution that she made has just been so overwhelming from my perspective that I have very few questions left to ask. It's just been an outstanding process. John, you've been great, but not to take away from you, I really have to tip my hat to Mary. It's been incredible, the amount of effort that she's put in, and I really don't have that many more questions to ask, so thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Great, thanks, Joe. Mary?
No questions. Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Questions or comments from the public with respect to the asset purchase agreement? I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that. I saw a hand. John Asher.
Well, I'm just going to say I'm incredibly proud of what all our Hingham team together has accomplished during the past 8+ years. This is really a historic milestone for the town of Hingham. And it's certainly an emotional moment for some of us. I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to all the people who have worked so hard and for so long on behalf of the town's ratepayers, who I believe will benefit for many years to come. Thank you, and bravo Zulu.
Thank you. And thanks for all your work, John. Further comments or questions from members of the public? It seems a little anticlimactic, right? Like this is a big, big deal, and I'm sorry. Again, I'm sorry it's happening on a Wednesday night, and I'm sorry we're not at town hall together for this, because it really is, as we've all said, momentous milestone for the town, and an opportunity for the town, I think, to really now operate this system in the best interest of the ratepayers and the best interest of the town. So I guess if there's no further comments or questions, I would take a motion. Mary, would you like to make the motion?
Before you do that, Mary, John, I was going to ask you a question about the motion.
Sure.
I was going to suggest that we split the motion into two. The first part being to approve the asset purchase agreement, and then subsequently to take further action with respect to all side letters and settlement statements, et cetera, just because there is an integration clause in the asset purchase agreement, and we need to be clear that the actions taken, that the other actions are taken subsequent, so they're not mooted by the integration clause in the asset purchase agreement.
I'm fine with that, Joe. So we would end after Inc. You would stop there and then and continue where the and do further and make that a separate motion.
Correct. That would be my recommendation.
I'm okay with that.
But I will leave it to Mary, since you have been the laboring oar here.
Thank you. On behalf of the town of Hingham, I would make a motion that the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to Article 10 of the 2019 Town of Hingham Annual Town Meeting and Chapter 139 of the Acts of 1879 as amended, and all other applicable laws, do hereby vote to approve and sign the asset purchase agreement in substantially the form attached hereto between the Town of Hingham and Aquarion Water Company of Massachusetts, Inc., and Aquarion Water Capital of Massachusetts, Inc.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen? Aye.
Joe, I might suggest you make the second motion.
Okay, so I move that in furtherance of the motion just adopted, that we further authorize Mary Power to approve and execute all side letters, settlement statements, wire instructions, and all closing documents on behalf of the Board of Selectmen to complete said purchase of the water system.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen? Aye. Fantastic. Well done, everybody. I've got a big glass of water going right now. So
Water is not sufficient.
there's another item on the agenda, which is public comment for items not on the agenda this evening. Does anybody in the audience care to ask a question or make a comment with respect to something that's not on the agenda this evening? I do not see any hands raised. One quick thing I would like to say is Mary Jo and I got an email from Lieutenant DiNapoli. He was reporting for himself and Sergeant Kilroy that the outdoor movie night at the Scarlet Oak Tavern, I guess, went very well last night. He's working cooperatively, or they're working cooperatively with the Scarlet Oak management to tweak a thing or two, but it sounded like it was a really, really nice event and certainly a beautiful night. So I know we spent a lot of time working through those details a meeting or two ago, but it sounds like, again, with the leadership of our administrative team and our executive health officer, that that went off without a hitch. So I'm glad that the families in Hingham that chose to participate could do so safely. So Joe or Mary, any comments or questions before I accept a motion to adjourn?
Anything I say would be anticlimactic, and this is just such an incredible event. So thank you, Karen and Mary, for this. I really inherited this transaction that was approved at town meeting prior to my tenure, and thank you both.
Well, I suspect you're going to have some work to do during this transition, and this is the beginning, I think, of of kind of the next phase of this transaction. And I think you're just the guy to be in the seat to help Mary with that.
Thank you.
Mary, anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, Joe,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
Karen, aye.